Today's thrift store challenge will be a little bit different as we will be making over my small entryway. So we're going to look for some high-end inspiration, and then we're gonna go to the thrift store to see what we can come up with for a whole lot less. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I really love about this entryway space is this brick wall. I love that they carried the exterior materials inside and add so much visual interest. Now, my house is not made of brick, but I still think I can kind of get a similar look on a budget that's not going to be labor intensive. So I ordered these sheets on Amazon, and I will try to link as many things as I can down in the description box below. But as I was putting them up, I wasn't crazy about how they were kind of fitting and fusing together. So what I decided to do was basically just Tetris them. So I would cut a section off of one panel and then do the exact opposite on the other. So that way they would kind of just slide together like a puzzle. And that created a much more seamless look. After it was up, I just wasn't crazy about how shiny they were, and the overall color was just extremely white. So I decided to just mix the color that I used on my walls and mix it with some plaster to create a more putty-like consistency. I ended up doing 2 coats of that mixture, and then to finish it off, added a piece of trim to the bottom as well as on the sides just to create a more finished look. With the wall complete, now it's time to style and decorate it. So I desperately wanted to have a table in this area that felt very antique and vintage. So I kept my eyes out for a long time at the thrift store, and I never really came across anything that was the right size or style that I was really looking for. And on the MCGEE CO website, even if it was the right size, it was incredibly expensive, thousands of dollars for vintage and antique furniture. So I decided to start going on a pretty regular basis to an antique mall near my house. And while I didn't find a table, I found these antique drawers, and I loved all of the weathering and the wear and tear to them. It's things like that that just add a lot of personalization and character to your space. So I ended up buying both of them. They were $30 a piece. So I'm only going to use one for this project. To attach them to the wall, I grabbed a pack of these D-rings, and I'm going to apply these to the back of the top of this now wooden makeshift shelf. I then grabbed my painter's tape, and I just laid it across the back of where I placed the D-rings and made markings with my pencil so I would know where I would need to start drilling screws into the wall. With the screws in place, I just then hooked the shelf onto those screws. And this is how our old drawer turned into makeshift wall shelf turned out. I think that this just adds so much soul and character to my entryway. It's one of the first things you see, and best of all, it was only $30. So now is time to style above that shelf. So typically, if you have a large entryway, you could probably get away with doing some artwork here, but because my entryway is very narrow and I wanna make that space feel as big as possible, doing a mirror makes more sense in that space. So I wanted to get the biggest mirror I could fit on top of that shelf. So I ended up finding this one here, and it was just $5. So this is the mirror that we ended up bringing home. I know it looks a little bit rough. As I was checking out, I think the person thought like I was a little bit crazy to buy it, but it was only $5, and I think it just really could benefit from obviously a good cleaning, but then just maybe a coat or two of some paint. I'm going to start off by just taping off this section here, and I'm going to sand it just like a scuff sand to get off. I'm pretty sure this is chocolate. I'm just gonna give it like a good clean scuff sand and then paint. Once both coats of the chalk paint had dried, I just removed the tape, and then somehow some paint still got on the mirror. So if this ever happens to you, one hack I love to use is Goof Off. You can also use nail polish remover if it is 100% acetone, but it basically just totally saved this project. And then all I had to do now was just give it one final clean, and the mirror was ready to be hung up. Because I had all of the other supplies on hand, this mirror still just really only cost me $5, and I think it totally opens up my entryway space. A decor item I generally like to have in any entryway are some sort of candles because they just add a lot of ambience and coziness to your space. And that's of course what we want to feel when we walk into our spaces. So at the Hartville Thrift Shop, I found these really beautiful candle holders that complement the spindles on my stair rail perfectly because they have that twist detail. They did have quite a bit of glitter on them, so I just had to clean them really well. And sometimes that's all it is. It just needs a good clean. Placed some candles in here, and I think it's the perfect addition to this entryway styling. To light the candles, I love this piece from MCGEE CO, but it is $48, and I never thought I would find anything even similar to this at the thrift store, so I did contemplate buying it, but I'm glad I didn't because I found this. To light those candles that we end up putting on these, I'm going to make this into a match striker. So my plan is to just take a few of these, I'll put them in here, but then cut a section of this off and just attach it to the bottom. I think it's just a nice way to display your matches or your lighter or whatever, but it was super affordable and it doesn't take up very much space. So for just $4, I was able to add a means to lighting these candles, and it adds another material, another texture, and it looks super high-end on a budget. Another consistent element that is basically in every entryway that I love is statement greenery. So oversized, and some of you might remember when I found this Studio MCGEE olive tree for just $4. There was just one thing wrong with it. There was like a little chip taken out of it. So I just grabbed my apple barrel gray paint and I just kind of tried to buff that out as best as possible, and it is good as new. The last little element I wanted to add is some just kind of stacked artwork. I feel like a lot of designers do that, and I think it just, again, adds a little bit more visual interest. So doing this the thrifted way does take a little bit more effort, but you can save a ton of money. So I found this frame at the Goodwill bins. I paid about $1 for it. The only thing I didn't love was that it was kind of that chrome silver and there was a lot of scratches. So I ended up just spray painting the frame black. And then for the artwork, I contemplated buying one of those prints from the antique mall, but then decided to grab my thrifted Turner sketchbook that I paid $2 for, just because it gives me a lot of options and there's so many beautiful sketches in here. And ultimately doing it this way is great because if I ever get tired of seeing the same print, or if the seasons change and I want something that's a little bit more seasonally appropriate, I can just very easily swap it out for something else, and it was only $3. Moving along now into the other elements that I added. So I didn't really get any storage out of this makeover yet. So I wanted to find a basket that complemented my floors really well. So typically a gray wash kind of basket is really expensive, even at places like Home Goods. But I ended up finding this one at the thrift store for just $3. And it was the absolute perfect tone. Oftentimes thrifted baskets tend to pull a bit too orange for my space. So this was a great addition. And when we bought this house, originally they had kind of more cherry colored floors. So the orangey kind of tone of the stair rail wasn't as apparent. But then once we changed our floors over, they just really clashed. So we knew we needed to do something with it, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money or time doing it. So I'm going to show you an example of exactly what I did. Taking this down to earth ultra matte spray paint, I gave one kind of thin layer over everything, and then I went in with a chip brush and just added this antiquing wax. So this little shortcut here saved me so much money, so much time. When my husband and I got some estimates on how much it would cost to refinish our stair rail, it was going to be about $2,000. So with some spray paint and some antiquing wax, and instead of applying that same concept to the spindles, we decided to go with these black metal ones that just adds a more modern touch to our staircase. So above the basket, I knew I wanted a set of wall hooks. So the basket was gonna hold the shoes, but I wanted a set of hooks that could hold scarves and lightweight coats and things like that. I found this bag of hooks at the Goodwill bins, and they were about $1.29, and I believe they were supposed to be used to store coffee mugs. The problem was a lot of those pieces weren't included in that bag, so I decided to just remove those sections that were meant to be connected to something else, and then that way it was just a nice clean surface. To attach these, again, because I'm not going to be putting a ton of weight on here, I stacked 3 command strips in a row and then just staggered the 2 hook sets that I did and put them in opposite directions, so that way it would resemble something like a set of vertical wall hooks. Wall hooks like these, even at affordable stores like Target, can be at least $25, so the fact that I was able to create something very custom that fits my space well for about $1.29 is a major steal. So not including the stair rail, this little entryway makeover cost just over $100, and I think it looks super high-end on a budget. And that really wraps it up for today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed this style of a video where we kind of tackle specific areas of our spaces in an affordable but aesthetic way. I hope everybody has an amazing week. Bye for now.